Jenny, it's so great to connect today. You write about and think about and have worked on topics that I'm very interested in. And so I look forward to our discussion today.
Great to be here.
As you think back on the things you've learned from your experience, which you've had some incredible experiences, what lessons would you most want to pass on to others?
So I think a lot about the 9 traits that hold people back, that essentially create the bars of an invisible cage that keeps you playing small. And I want to encourage people to play smart. So if I'm encouraging you to play smart, I would say reclaiming these 9 traits can be beneficial: weird, selfish, shameless, nosy, obsessed, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy. And what I've been thinking about a lot, and I think will resonate with you, is the concept of shameless. So the original definition is insensible to disgrace. My redefinition of the word is the courage to stand behind your efforts and abilities. So to me, shameless is all about finding your swagger. I once chased a total stranger off the New York City subway and gave him my business card, and he is now the father of my 2 children, and we've been married 11 years. So a little bit of a shameless act there, but there's so many ways you can apply healthy shamelessness in the workplace, as a student, in your home life, etc.
So, when you think about Shameless, like, why did you decide to write about this, and why do you think this is such an important trait?
Yeah, so shameless is one of my favorites for you in this particular audience, because in the workplace or in school, we are constantly feeling imposter syndrome, right? I grew from entry level to executive. I was there nearly 18 years at Google. And it was almost like the higher I rose, the more imposter syndrome I felt, because I was surrounding myself by even more impressive people, or even more, there was a higher bar as I continued to rise the corporate ladder. So and I see brilliant people, Nate, get stuck by getting in their own way. At the end of the day, so much of our limitations of what we accomplish in life and our success comes down to us getting in our own way: fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of uh, you know judgment of others. And when you're a little bit more shameless, when you find your swagger and kick that imposter syndrome to the curb, you're more likely to get over that fear and get out of your own way.
When I hear about Shameless and hear you talk about this, I think of Michael Jordan and one of the greatest competitors of all time. Something that I was struck by about him, and I would love to talk to him about this someday. But at the time of his second retirement, so he just won his sixth NBA championship. And I was amazed by how many people in the media praised him for going out on top. And on one hand, I think it's like, yeah, cool, put a nice little bow on your story. You went out as the greatest, and your last shot was, winning an NBA championship. But as a athlete, I was thinking like, well, if you want to play, keep playing. And if you're capable of playing, keep playing. Who cares what other people think? So I was thinking of this kind of like from a shameless, like, what do I care what the media writes about me? If I want to play, I should play. And if it tarnishes my legacy a little bit, so be it. And I don't know if that's what he was thinking about. And I know he did come back and play a little bit for the Wizards later on, but there's a part of me, anytime I hear somebody say like, it's important to like protect your legacy, or you got to manage your image. I really like the idea of like, I just want to be shameless. I want to be insensible to disgrace. I want to reinvent myself. I'm just going to go after what I want to go after.
I love it. And that's, I mean, my book is called Wild Courage: Go After What You Want and Get It. So you've
Yeah.
just named the subtitle of my book. But what really stood out to me from what you just said is, who cares what other people think?
Yeah.
And that's similar to how I felt that day in the subway. I was like, all right, I mean, if he turns me down, then I have an answer. To me, that's better than the uncertainty of sitting and waiting. And think about all the times that you're at work thinking, should I ask my boss for this? Should I not ask my boss for this? Should I tell this colleague that, I'm struggling with the division of labor on this project? Should I just sit quietly and let life happen to me? I would argue oftentimes that is going to hold you back, and it's going to give you less in life than your full potential. So who cares what other people think is a great way to frame it. It's basically the thesis of my work: is sure, you could go along to get along, you could try to fit in. That worked great in high school when you don't want to stand out, because standing out in algebra could mean, the rest of your seventh grade year as a disaster. But, this highly competitive world of 8,000, sorry, of 8 billion people interconnected, and all the people we work with who are smart and talented and capable, and all of our peers and students and colleagues, standing out is really one of your surefire ways to succeed.
Yeah, one of the best ways to never get selected for any sort of leadership position is to just fit in and never stand out, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I have the story, and this is a little bit extreme, but there was this competition that my team was up for, this award at work. And I was like, rather than filling out the questionnaire of 3 questions of our business impact and the metrics, we made a music video. And it was an absurd thing to do, but it stands out. And years later, a leader mentor of mine said, Jenny, keep doing exactly that. That stands out. Now, what you might be thinking is, okay, but what if I'm never going to make a music video, right? There's so many ways that you, in very, very tiny ways, can be shameless as a student or at work. For example, there's something a tool I have called the pencil sharpener, which is if you get a big, scary, hairy project in school or at work and you just don't even know where to begin, take a breath, open up a blank document, write down these 5 topics: goal, self-imposed deadline, stakeholders to meet, next steps, questions I still have. And within 24 hours, send that to your professor, send that back to your boss and say, hey, you told me to tackle a flying shoes project, right? Just using an absurd example for something that seems scary and difficult. And write down a couple of assumptions. Write down the first 3 people you plan to meet, Harry, Jane, and Mike, right? Write down what you think the goal is. Are we trying to pitch this to a client? Are we trying to pitch flying shoes to investors, right? Just kind of getting anything down on paper, because that gets you over the imposter syndrome and your own, not shame as in the classic sense of shame, but shame as in I'm nervous, I'm fearful, I'm scared I'm going to do the wrong thing, I don't know where to begin, versus having the confidence, the swagger, the wherewithal to just take a stab at it. Because you're right, those are the people who eventually get recognized as leaders. Even if your answers are wrong, at least you're moving the ball forward and you're showing your boss or professor that you know how to take a first shot at something.
Yeah, I love this. Courage to stand behind efforts, find your swagger, insensible to disgrace. And I think that's such a better approach to take than worrying, what are people going to think about me? When the truth is, they're probably not even thinking about you because they're thinking about themselves. That's what we tend to think about most is ourselves.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
one thing I want to ask then, okay, so you're promoting Shameless here, and I love it. You talk about chasing your husband off well, your husband to be off the subway.
Yeah.
Could you share more detail on that and provide an example? Because to me, that illustrates exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and more detail about that moment, or more details about how that applies in daily life.
Both.
Okay, great. So first we'll take first, actually, you said most people are thinking about themselves and not you. So true. There's research behind this. It's called the spotlight effect. And this is why we think that, everybody's staying awake at night thinking about that typo we made in an email where we feel shameful or embarrassed, when really, no, they're thinking about the typo they made in that email. So applying that to that day on the subway, I had to recognize, I was sitting there 30 feet away from me, 20 feet away from me was this really attractive guy. It was a silent subway. It was packed. It was rush hour. Nobody talks to each other on a packed train during rush hour. And I said, all right, if he gets off at my stop, then maybe I'll strike up a conversation with him, right? Letting shame come into the mix a little bit. They're like, oh, I made a deal with myself. Only if he gets off at my stop will I talk to him. And then he got off at the next stop, which was not my stop. And then I said, no, forget the shame, forget what other people think, forget what he thinks. I'm just going to live into the answer on this one and go see what happens. So I chased after him in my disheveled, hair. It was a blizzard and puffy winter coat. And I caught up with him. I said, excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but you were on my subway and I thought you were cute. Any chance I could give you my business card? And Nate, he took the card. He took the card, and he took me on a date, and he took me to the altar.
It's such a fantastic story, and it's just such a great illustration. I mean, I can relate a little bit. I saw my wife one day. I thought she was beautiful. It took me several months to approach her,
Put up
but
the
finally
courage.
one day was
Yeah.
like, well, why not? One of my favorite, I guess, decision rules or way to think about decision making from Chip and Dan Heath. They talk about the 10-10-10 rule. And so one of the questions they ask, say you're thinking about making a decision. how are you going to feel about this 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, 10
Hmm.
years from now, right? And just by getting a little perspective on it, it helps you see like, okay, if I chase him off the subway and he says, sorry, I'm already in a relationship, or, no, you're weird. Even, imagine the worst thing he could say, like, no, you're a weirdo. Okay, well,
Yeah.
10 minutes from now, you're going to feel like crap. 10 months from now, you're not going to care. 10 years from now, you couldn't care less. Like, and you're going to feel good that you tried. So I love the 10-10-10 framework of like, you should just do it. You should be shameless. And then I love promoting shameless as a trait because I think it is so undervalued. And one of the main themes of this podcast is underappreciated. And I think shameless is an
Mhm.
underappreciated trait.
Yeah, definitely. And I also promised I'd share another example from my daily life. I'm working on a contract right now that I got the contract from a partner I'm going to be working with, and frankly, it seemed very one-sided. And it's taken a lot of wild courage, even this morning, for me to muster up the ability to write back and ask for some pretty substantial and significant changes that make it a little bit more even. And it's tough to do those things. And so, whether it's a contract or chasing someone off the subway, which is a bit of an extreme example, or even just risking speaking up in a meeting to be noticed by your boss's boss, or thoughtfully disagreeing with your boss because you think the direction of the company should be XYZ versus ABC, or seeking a mentor or a sponsor at work and shamelessly sending somebody a Slack or a ping after the meeting and saying, "Hey, I loved what you had to say. Would you be open to 30 minutes?" So whether it's this, big scary negotiation that I'm or contract that I'm negotiating today, or even just something very minor in the day-to-day of your work that allows you to connect with people of influence, which is so critical to get ahead. It's as much about the relationships you have with the higher ups in your organization as it is the work you do day to day. Or maybe it's shamelessly self promoting in a really thoughtful way every Monday morning with a 15-minute email to your boss about three accomplishments you're proud of last week and three things you're going to tackle this week. Like, as a Google exec for, being at the company for nearly 18 years, I would say maybe like 5% of my direct reports over years and years ever sent me that beautiful shameless Monday morning email. And when you send that email, you stand out so much because it's really, whether you agree with this or not, it's not just what you do, it's what your manager thinks you do. And as much as you have on your plate, your manager has probably 7 to 10 times as much on their plate because they have to deal with their plate and then the plates of the 7 to 10 people who report to them. So reminding them of your awesomeness, your power assets, the great strengths and talents you have, the metrics that you accomplished last week or last month or last quarter is a really thoughtfully shameless way to succeed in your role and to keep moving up, getting promoted, getting more money, etc.
Yeah, so great. If you don't get noticed, it's hard to get promoted. And we can't just assume others are going to be aware of what we're accomplishing. We have to let them know. Oh, of course,
Actually,
tactfully,
Nate,
right?
assume they're not aware. Assume
Yeah.
that everybody is too busy focusing on themselves, right? That just assume they're not aware. Go ahead.
No, I think that's so great because I think we assume the opposite. And your advice here is don't fall into the trap. Assume nobody knows ever what you're doing. And then tactfully, and I think this is where shameless maybe gets a bad rap, is there are ways to do this that maybe you turn people off or that it could be a disadvantage to you, right? So like your manager wants to know what you're doing and they want to know what you're doing well and they want to know what you're going to do. So it makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world to tell them what you're doing well and what you're going to do.
Absolutely. And I often advise that there are trait traps to all of these 9 traits. A trait trap is are guardrails, basically. Here's what it looks like when you take it too far. And I fell into one when writing this book. I loved the designs that were given to me by the publisher and the art team. And I said, okay, these are good. And how many more can we see? And at this point, they'd already sent me so many. I was I was falling into a trait trap where I was asking for too much and I was almost on the brink of embarrassment of how much more I was asking for. And sometimes we have these wonderful coaches, in this case, my editor, who's like, "Jenny, I think you're falling into a trait trap. I think you're being a little bit too nosy, right? You're getting insatiably curious. That's good. But when you take it too far, you're asking to see too many more designs. You probably have enough to choose from. You're shameless. That's good. You're asking for what you want, but you're standing. You've got the courage to stand behind your desire to see more. But I think you might be teetered. Actually, I was more self-critical as opposed to her, and I shared with her my that I think I was falling it that I thought I was falling into a trait trap, but I think I was taking it a little bit too far. So, yes, these 9 traits are to balance the playing field for the people who don't tend to speak up and who don't tend to believe in their efforts and abilities and who don't feel like, they have the right to ask for something or that there's anything fabulous about them to stand out about at work. And I would say, yes, there is something incredibly fabulous about every single one of you. And then, of course, we can take them too far, and that's when we have to be mindful of the trait trap. So the goal is to even the playing field. But of course, there are some people who really are manipulative, who really are shameless, who really are selfish in the negative sense. But the vast majority of people are not shameless, manipulative, or selfish enough. Manipulative just being the courage to influence, to have the confidence that you can have influence over others. Most
Yeah,
people are too nervous to do it.
it's great. And I think you're getting at, like you said, our default is most of us are not being shameless enough in all likelihood. Well,
We're
and
all timid on the inside. We're all timid on the inside. So it takes practice to come out of that shell.
and then for those of us who aren't, don't be crazy about it, right? So there's a
Yeah.
balance. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
Jenny, this is so great. I love the idea. Nobody on the podcast has talked about this before. Any last thing you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
Cheer your wins, right? I was just writing my newsletter. I have a weekly newsletter that goes out with a quick tip to succeed in life and work. And I just decided like this week's going to be a wrap up for the year about like, what are you proud of this year? So what are the three things that you are most proud of? Write them down. Write down three sentences that all start with the two words, I'm proud. I'm proud of this in 2020. Let me retake this because we're coming out in March, actually. Do you edit?
Yeah, I can edit. Yeah, I'll edit this.
Okay, cool. So do you just want to ask me again, like any closing thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Um, so as we wrap up here, any final word you'd like to share as we wrap up? Sorry, I knocked over my nut mic. Okay, let me
Oh, good.
do that again.
The wheels are coming off the train.
All right. So yeah, as we wrap up here, any final words you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, doubling down on the concept of shamelessness, a really powerful phrase is I'm proud. So whether you write that again in that 15-minute email to your boss, I'm proud of this last week, I'm proud of that last week, at the end of this quarter, at the end of this week, write down three things you're proud of just for yourself. Forget the boss, forget your professor, forget your partner. Just write down three things you're proud of. I'm proud of this, I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the other thing. And it just feels so good. We spend so much time focusing on where we need to improve or what's not going well or that contract we lost or that grade we didn't get that we wanted. But reframing it and thinking about where things have gone well and what you've accomplished over the last X period of time is so powerful in your journey to be more shameless.
Well, Jenny, this is so great. I look forward to reading the book and I look forward to not only sharing it with my students, but these are lessons that I also want to pass on to my children as well. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.